The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Ethics of Authentic Representation series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the PGM VO List, Voices of Color, and its members. Good afternoon to some, good evening to others. Thank you for joining us for this is our fourth Ethics and Authentic Representation panel. I'm your moderator, Tanesha Nicole. And as usual, I am joined by founder of the PGM VO List, Edward Hong, VOC co-founder Jazzy Frizzle, VO actor Marcus Rothenberg, and our special guest award-winning voice actor and authenticity dialogue consultant, Eli Harris. Welcome, everyone. We go through this every month. If you don't know, we mentioned that although the entertainment industry continues to move forward with more authentic castings and representation and voiceover work, there is still so much more that needs to be done before we have reached parity and before equity is reached. During the first hour of our panel, we'll have what is sure to be a lively discussion, if anything about what you just saw prior to is evidence. And we're going to talk about the impact of authentic casting and what organizations can do to support working PGM voice actors. As we roll into the second hour, we'll roll into a live Q&A. So please utilize the Q&A chat box to ask any questions. We know that there are varying opinions on this topic. We've seen this in multiple representations of this panel, and things can get a little heated and things can escalate very quickly if anyone that follows any of us on Twitter knows. Respectful discourse is acceptable and it is perfectly expected. However, please keep all comments, questions professional and respectful and tactful. Any abusive, bullying, derogatory, or inflammatory language is strictly prohibited, and moderators and admins reserve the right to remove any attendee who does not adhere to this request. My block finger is strong. Y'all know this. I have no problem with booting anybody out and you won't get back in. Just gonna put that out there now, okay? Before we get started, we would like to begin by acknowledging the indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we all call home. I myself and several of our panelists here are grateful to live and work and host this event from traditional and unceded territories of the Chumash and the Gabrielino Tongva peoples of Los Angeles and the Atacapa Ixtoc people for Houston. We encourage our PGM VO List community and all of our partners throughout the VO industry to reflect on the effects of residential schools and colonialism on Indigenous families, communities, and engage in reconciliation meaningfully. That being said, y'all ready to get to work? Now that I've gotten all the proper stuff out of the way? All right. So let's do, since this is our fourth one, and maybe some new folks who are joining us who are watching via the live streams who are not accustomed to us, let's start with a round of introductions. I'm going to start from my top left, which is Edward, who is the founder of the PGM VO List.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. What are we doing again?
Bruh, intros.
Oh my.
Get on
Hello, hi. This is a great, wonderful start. Hi, my name is Edward Hall. I am the founder of the PGM VO List. Don't laugh at me. I'm the founder of the PGM VO List. I am an actor in terms of on-camera voiceover and theater. I'm gonna stop talking here before I get into a bigger mess. So, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
I'm not even going to ask you to popcorn it over to somebody because I don't think that you're going to be able to manage that right now. We're going to move on over to Marcus. Marcus, are you attentive? Are you ready?
I'm good. I'm Marcus Rothenberg, voice actor based out of Central Illinois. I'm Marcus Rothenberg.
Y'all are on something today. I don't know what it is.
I don't know what else to say. What else do you want to know? I dye my beard. I'm bald.
I mean, things that are evident, but you know, for 200, but hey, that works out well. Thank you, Marcus. Jazzy, they have set the bar fairly low. Do you at least know your name?
Most days, yes. Today is one of those days. I'm Jazzy Frizzle. Hello. Be careful what you smoke, kids. It could, affect your brain. I am a voice actor, co-founder of Voices of Color, and a bona fide, all over the place person. So, hello.
Y'all gonna make it. And that is Lennox, because he does not agree with what you just said. See, he made it known. He made it known. We're gonna round this out, and we're gonna go to our special guest this month, and that is Eli Harris. Eli, tell us a little bit about yourself and how and why you got into VO.
Hi, I'm award. Edward had me laughing. Award-winning actor and voice artist Eli Harris. Been in the game for a little over 20 years on screen, and transitioned into VO a few years ago. So I'm glad to be here on PGM. I think that what Edward has done for this is a great thing.
Well, thank you so much for that. All righty, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. If people are prepared, if you were prepared, everybody got the giggles out? Everybody's all right now? Lennox isn't finally shut up. I sent him out somewhere. I don't know what to do. Okay, so when we get to nitty-gritty, we have a list of questions that are prepared, just kind of organic conversation, right? So quick question. What has been your experience as a person of global majority, otherwise known person of color? Those two terms are interchangeable, in the video game side of VO, because I know you do commercial work and everything like that, but specifically, what has been your experience as a person of color, person of the global majority in video games?
It's actually been a great experience. Video gaming, along with animation, are probably the toughest to get into on our side. Generally, you come in through commercial. Fortunately, I have worked with enough clients to where I established myself and got a solid amount of video game work and people that I've lined up to work with. So for me, it's been pretty good. Little rough starting off, of course, just like for anybody else, but it's been pretty good.
Right, so you haven't really had some of the struggles like we've seen, like we've talked about on Twitter and everything like that between PGM and the Voices of Color. It's good to know that you've had a great experience, because that hasn't always been the case that we've seen.
Yeah, and maybe because I'm newer to VO than most of the people that's been in it, so I know there are a lot of things that have changed and are still progressing in a way that is where it's more favorable for all of us. But I mean, there's different obstacles to accompany that, if that makes any sense. Because like I said, it's more difficult to get into this, to do video games. It's really freaking difficult.
Gotcha. And then you see a bunch of shaking heads here, like, yep, they get that. You recently spoke at the Game Devs of Color conference this past Friday, and you spoke specifically on authenticity and diversity in VO. How did that even come about?
One of the brothers, so I'm associated with Black and Gaming, with Big, the organization Big, and I represent VO for them. And one of the brothers that is part of the organization, by the name of Jonathan Jennings, had mentioned GDOT to me. And I hadn't heard of it. And then I started doing research and realized, like, man, this organization is freaking dope, because they showcase a whole lot of indie devs and some AAA people that work with AAA titles and things like that. And so I asked them, do you think this is something that I could be a part of? Because they have never had anyone represent VO for them. And so Jonathan told me, reach out to them. He said, I'll put in a word for you, but, which is building relationships is one of the biggest things of this business. And we'll tap into that later. But Jonathan said, I'll say something to them about it. They've never had anyone to do VO, but they would be crazy to not have you on there, based on all that I've done. And so I reached out to them. I had to fill out a form and list credentials and things like that, references, etc. They're very, very thorough. They're not one of those people where you could just submit to them and drop some stuff and they'd be like, okay, you're on. They vet you. And so I was, of course, very happy to receive the email that they would have me on. and they had never thought to have someone to represent the VO side of the business before. I thought that's something that needs to be done because I feel that we are, for lack of better term, the minority of game development. We're oftentimes the ones that don't get a ton of credit for what we bring to games. We know of the Phil Lamars and Keith Davids and all of them, but for the most part, we're like the unsung heroes. So I felt that it was important that what we do gets brought to light, and along with the development of games. And obviously they agreed with it because they brought me on.
Fantastic. So what would you say have been some of your biggest influences kind of along your journey? First of all, how long has your journey been? Where are you in your journey? And then what have been some of the biggest influences that you've had along the way?
So in the entertainment industry, I would probably say most of my life. I started off in theater at 6 years old. My parents got me involved in theater because I have ADHD, and I was a lot to deal with. And they got me involved with that and martial arts. And then I got into gaming as well. I don't know how many people remember this system, but it's called a Color Computer 3, a Tandy TRS-80. That's the very first system that I worked on. It's a computer, but you had to type everything in DOS and do animation and stuff like that. And then they had the little game cartridges and whatnot. Then I got the Atari 2600. When I got the Nintendo, it was a wrap from there, as far as being a gamer. But I started off in theater and did a little bit throughout my school years. Of course, that fell off as I got older because I got into other things. Went into the military, served the country, and then I met my wife afterwards, and I worked some pretty good jobs, architecture, different fields, and I told my wife I wanted to get back into the arts. And so she encouraged me to do it. So that's when I started my on-screen acting, and I had been doing that since early 2000s. So I didn't transition into VO until a few years ago. I wanted to do something different. Doing voices was something that I was interested in, just not something that I knew that I thought that I could, make a living from, if that makes any sense.
Makes perfect sense. Couple of
And
folks
so
like Ed came from on screen and then went into VO.
And I found that, doing voice work provides a totally different energy for me. Like being on camera, I'm sure Edward can attest to this. When you're doing on camera work, it is like surreal because you have, people watching you and you're portraying these different type of people, and it's such a rush. It's a high that you get from it. Doing voiceover gives me a totally different high on a different level because now I could do something vocally that I might not be able to try in person. I might not be able to be this big, humongous monster that's going through punching things through walls, but I can get behind this mic and do that. So it provides a totally different feel for me, and it's therapeutic. I think any of us who do VO, there's a certain level of therapy in it for us.
Ed Ed is nodding in yes, Jasmine. Yes. What has been your experience? Is it kind of mirrored what Eli's talked about?
Pretty much. I mean, I still continue on camera and theater stuff to this day, but there is something that voiceover has that the other realms cannot really quite compete. And Eli basically hit it, which is just that because it is your voice, you can do characters that you normally thought you never would have been able to play. So there is that. While I would say like on camera might be the most restrictive because it is purely just on your looks. Theater, you can kind of get away with. There is more imagination in theater, and I will say, like, in terms of one of the best experiences I had as an actor is like performing in front of 500 people 7-8 nights a week. That's one of the highlights of my career, where it's just like you get to perform for that many people, and every night is a different experience, and there's nothing like it. It's also extremely stressful because it's just like if you have to do like 2 performances back to back to back, it can take a toll on you, especially if you don't prepare yourself correctly. But with voiceover, I think the possibilities are endless, and I think even more so as we got into 2020, and then the talks of diversity, especially obviously after this, what sparked the global Black Lives Matter movement, the voiceover realm, I felt like to this day has like leaped the highest out of all the realms, whether it be on camera or theater. I would say theater is like dead last. They're still struggling. I still see the the issues they go through, and it feels like we're like still stuck in the 1960s or something because of the shit they go through. On camera is getting better. We're seeing more and more projects of like different diversity and like meaningful diversity, not just like someone just a co-star or like a one-liner, but like they're the main characters. And then voiceover, I think we're seeing an explosion of projects of that just reflect the world that we live in. So I think in that sense, I share Eli's feelings, where it's like, on camera and theater, it's fun, but voiceover is just, there's nothing like it.
I have to say I respect that with you, because although I started in theater, I couldn't do it anymore. It's a lot of work. It's a whole lot of work. And I think one of the things that I really like about theater is the improv aspect of it. Like if you foul up or you mess up, you can kind of play it off a little bit better. You know what I'm saying? It's live, and usually when you're working with a good group of people, they know how to do it with you, so that you don't stand out like you messed up. You know what I'm saying? But just theater was so much work, man. So I had gravitated more towards the film and television part. So I could hand claps to you, man. I commend you for still doing theater, because it's a lot of work.
We haven't heard from Marcus or Jazzy. Marcus, are you a theater kid?
I was for a long time, and it was specifically church plays.
Oh boy.
My church used to do plays all the time. I don't know why my church was like, this is the thing, this is what we're doing. But we did plays all the time. And they also had a thing where they would like to try and adapt Christian movies into a play that we would put on. So like God's Not Dead, Left Behind, stuff like that. We did that as play. We tried like adapting it as plays. And
How did it work?
like I said, they tried adapting it, and we did our best. I will say we did our best, and people appreciated it. People kept coming, so it must not have been that bad. But it was one of those things where I got out of high school. I had joined the Air Force right out of high school, so I wasn't with that church anymore. And then after that, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm going to get back into theater once I got out of the military. I did one play, and I was like, man, this is harder than I remember. And I was like, maybe this isn't for me. Like the time commitment, the work, it was much for me. So yeah, like echoing Eli's sentiment, kudos to you, Ed, for still doing it, because I ain't got it in me, man.
I will have to say this. I think after the pandemic, theater has definitely been like a lot less on the focus, because it's like, when you get older and it's like theater out of all the realms, it's like, yes, I know, we could still talk about unfair wages and voiceover work, but theater, man, it's like the amount of time you have to put into rehearsals. And it's like, even at best, some of these regional theaters, they pay you like $500 to $700 a week for regional theaters. While it's like, the amount of time and effort, it is absurd. And then here in Los Angeles, there's a lot of great small theater companies. They pay $16 an hour. Like that's the work. And so
In
it's
California?
like, in California, it's crazy. Like there was one I just did, and where I auditioned for it, and I was kind of like hoping I wouldn't get it, because it was like, that means I would have to drive 30 miles there and 30 miles back to do this play, which, granted, was a great play, but it was just like, man, like $16 an hour is,
It hurts.
it hurts. It really
Yeah.
hurts. And so it's just like, there is, with voiceover, there are projects, yes, there's some things where it could be paid better, but like theater, it just feels like, you must really love the arts to pursue.
I was going to say that. And I was going to say that I think theater now is primarily for people that are passionate and want to keep their chops sharp. Because, Denzel still does theater. A lot of them still do theater to stay sharp. So I think you're right. It has to be a passion for it to do it now. You're not gonna get a house built with it.
Yeah, my reason for being in VO was because I don't want people to know who I am, and I don't want people to see my face, and I'm fine just being a voice. Like, I was a theater kid, choir kid. I was a part of the Black Actors Guild here in Colorado. We did improv, we did shows, and I'm just like, I'm social enough on my own. I don't need to know more people, or I don't need more people to know me. I'm bad at remembering who people are anyway. So those awkward people from like high school that walk up to me in the store and it's like, Jazzy, and I'm like, hey,
You,
yeah, what's up? Where do I know you? So it's, to me, it's just, I was like, nah, I love acting. I love the arts. I enjoy the content. I'll go see plays all the time, musicals, the whole nine, but I like being myself, and I like tattoos, and I don't like the pressures there. Thank you, Tori. There are no, I don't envy a single like celebrity I see. I don't envy like any of the things I see them go through. So I was like, just put me behind a mic. I'm good.
See, now you say all that, but we're all sitting here looking at you going, but we all know that you're low-key famous and you keep fighting the infamy, and I don't know why. But yeah, I called you. I put you out on Front Street. I did. I put you out on Front Street. I don't care. I said it.
Low key though.
Keep on. We'll see. All of you have mentioned diversity. So Eli, everybody has a different definition of what diversity is. What does diversity mean to you specifically as it relates to VO?
allowing people to represent their culture. That's what diversity means to me. Is, I don't know if people remember that John Wayne played Genghis Khan. You could have cast an Asian actor to play Genghis Khan. I think VO, that's what the diversity is to me, is let the cultures represent themselves. That's what diversity is to me. Let the people of the LGBTQ plus community, let them represent themselves. Don't hire somebody that's not from that community, because they're not going to represent that community accurately. Don't cast me to do someone that's Hispanic, even though I may speak Spanish. Let them represent their culture. So let every culture have a voice that can represent it for them. That is, to me, what diversity is being fair.
Fair. So I'm going to ask a loaded question here, and everybody's going to look at me sideways. So then, given what you just said about diversity and people being able to represent their cultures, what do you say to those people who say, oh, it's just a voice, anybody should be able to play anybody?
So in theory, I actually agree with that. I think if the voice is good and that it can bring, something to the project, I agree with that. The problem is that the landscape has never been fair for all of us. So yes, I agree that if the voice is good, the color shouldn't matter. The problem is it's never been that way. No matter how good our voice has been, we have to scratch and claw just to voice our own people. I'm sure Edward, Jazzy, Marcus can all agree to this, that it's never been a fair landscape for us to even voice our own people. So to that, I say, yes, I agree, but the landscape has never been fair in that sense. So that's why there's such a big issue as to us being able to voice our people. And when you mentioned earlier about, how the industry, the direction that it's going, I do see some of that changing. I see a lot of that changing. If you don't mind, I want to speak on one of the games that I'm the face of right now. Superfuse, which is an ARPG. It's a Diablo style game, comic inspired, dope game. It's been getting a lot of press. One of the things that the publishers and the game devs reached out to me for was, once they decided they was going to cast me, they said, look, and they were very straight up with me. We're a bunch of white guys from the Netherlands. We wrote the script based on what we see through the media and on our limited amount of research. So we tried to write the script the best way we could. If anything in this script does not fit your culture, let us know, and will adjust the script or allow you to have a say and input in the dialogue. That really threw me because I've never had that happen at all. I've never been asked my thoughts on a dialogue of somebody else's project. So we worked together on this project. And this one I've done a lot. This one is probably the one that's a lot more personal for me because they allowed me to have a say in what my character says and does in this game. So there are a lot of steps that are being made to make games more culturally accurate and appropriate. And I think also because people realize that people who play these games want to connect. They want to connect with the characters. You know, you see what's going on with the whole Little Mermaid thing. And I'm not talking about the idiots that want to sit here and cry and complain about that shit. But you see these videos of these girls, these little girls that are like, wow, she's black. Ariel, she's black. And you see all these kids that are identifying with it. The same thing when you saw Luca, you saw all these great kids that could identify to these characters. And when people play games, we got to keep in mind that a lot of times when we play games, it's to get away from reality. It's to get away from whatever garbage is going on in our life so we can have time for ourselves and go into an imaginary world. We also want representation there too. And so I think that a lot of these game devs and a lot of publishers are understanding, let's get some more real authenticity in this. You know, there are a lot of companies that are also now hiring people that are consultants for this stuff so that they can get it right. There's still a ways to go, but it is being done. I have seen my colleagues, you know, non-people of color that are turning down work and passing auditions. I've had it done to me where they have received work that's for an African-American male and they're like, hey, you want to take a crack at this because I don't feel comfortable doing it. That means a whole lot. You know, it's not just enough for us to say something, but we need those who aren't of color to speak up and say something too. Turn down the work that's not for you. You know, help make the playing field level for all of us. There's more than enough for us out here to eat on. So help, you know, and I do see that happen.
Yeah, I always say I don't want an ally, I want an accomplice. I want somebody who's gonna get down in the dirt with me that has as much skin in the game as I have. So thank you for that. We're talking about dialogue consultation and things like that. Have you done it on any other game other than Superfuse? I know that's a big one, but I know you mentioned during your talk on Friday about Starship Troopers.
Yeah, Starship Troopers. And I know there's a huge cult following for that entire movie franchise. Yes, they had me as the lead in that game. They had a very talented voice actress by the name of Amy Selma, who played Cortez. So yeah, they made sure in that game too that those who the people of color in that game were voiced by people of color. You know, and that's really big for us because, you know, Starship Troopers is such a popular franchise by Sony.
I'm not gonna lie, every time it comes on, I'm watching it and I love Starship. I'm a nerd that way and I love it. Ed, you've been doing a lot of work from an ADR director perspective. Talk a little bit about the conversations that you've had with what I like to call the powers that be about the authenticity. I think you posted something on Twitter, or someone did, about someone said, "Oh, that's Godzilla," and it's like, no, it's Gojira, and people look at you like you made a bad life choice in your pronunciations.
It's funny because so that thing is actually the thing I'm working on now. It's actually from a scene from that project, and it made me think because it's like this Japanese character goes out of his way to correct the white character, be like, no, Gojira is the correct pronunciation, not Godzilla. Godzilla is the anglicized thing. So the fact that this show actually made a point about it, and so that was something I would use to for this current thing because it was a Japanese project where it's just like all pronunciations of the names and names and places will go by the Japanese pronunciation as opposed to anglicized pronunciations. And so our casting director did a wonderful job, you know, having a, you know, the cast is pretty much 100% API, but a majority of them are Japanese. And I realized that it's the more I think about it, it's like, you know, I was also thinking about animes too, that there's how much anime has been taken over by white people that it's just like, you just have to think about it. You're like, anime is a Japanese art form, But when it comes to the English dubbing, it has been completely taken over by white people. And so I just put it out there, and it was interesting seeing how people responded well to it. It's like, not to say that like every cast, but like, what if there was one anime show or a movie that was directed by a Japanese person, adapted by a Japanese person, and most of the cast were Japanese people. Like the main characters were English dubbed by Japanese. Like, what would that look like? Like,
That would be dope.
that would be dope. And it's like, and echoing what Eli said earlier, I still think about it to this day, where it's just like when people are like, oh, can't we, it's just a voice, can't we do it all? I'm like, yes, ideally, I would love for that to happen. Like, the work that we have to do to maintain authentic diversity inclusion is exhausting. It's like, would I want to stop doing this? Yes, it would be great, because it will no longer be an issue, but it is still very much an issue. And it's not just when it comes to race, it comes to gender, it comes to the LGBTQ. Like there are so many battlegrounds, and it's just like, it's a never ending thing. And, I think it's important to tell people, like, look, if you come from a place of privilege where for most cis hetero white people, that was something they never had to worry about. And if they're like, all of a sudden, like, oh no, everything's changing, I'm like, well, kind of, yes, because our world is shifting, so that's what I would tell the powers to be with the things I'm directing, where it's just like, look, this might have been okay, maybe a decade ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, but our world is not that world anymore, where it's like, we do want to see the people who are voicing, but even if it's dubbing, even if it's that they are voiced by that. And it does, and I tell them it does reflect in the performance, because as for many of us who know dubbing, you don't get time to prepare for it. You're literally given what is shown to you, and you just do it. And it's basically, you have to be a master cold reader. Like that's basically what dubbing is. You have to be a master of cold reading. And so to help for that is like, if the actor knows the characters, or like knows the places or the cultural references that are being talked about in the show or video game, it makes it much faster. So that's something I tell producers, if they're concerned about money or time, it's like, well, look at it this way. It's faster. It's better product. That's what you want, right? Because in the end, that's what they care about. So it's like, I tell them, having more diversity, having more cultural nuances that are right, will not only give you a more superior product, but a more time efficient product as well. And so that's what I will be doing. And that's, I'm glad that like now this is the second time in working for Disney where they've been, accepting of that. Yet are there like obstacles? Yes, absolutely. There are things where, just recently they, suggested something, and I'm kind of was like, I don't know about that. So it's an ongoing conversation where it's just like, I also have to be cognizant that, you always have to keep pushing, because there's always concern that you feel like you pushed enough, and you worry that like, oh, maybe I'm pushing too much. Maybe I'm asking for too much. But then the thing is like, I think you have to keep pushing it. Like, do it respectively, respectfully, do it with civility, with professionalism. But I think you can always ask for more. I think you can always be like, no, I don't know if that dialogue sounded right, or I don't agree with how this character is portrayed. You can keep asking, you can keep going for it. And I think that's something I have to keep remembering as I do this ADR directing thing, where it's just like, to never quite be satisfied, but to not be an asshole about it. And it can be a challenge for me, because I tend to veer more towards asshole than like professional. So that's an ongoing journey for me. But I think that's something we can all do.
No, I just want to say something.
Well,
Ed, are you issuing a challenge?
Wait, to be
The
more
world is going to explode.
wait, to
if
be
Ed
more
issues a
asshole
challenge.
or what?
To have a authentic cast and diverse cast.
I issue that challenge. Yes.
Oh, so the gauntlet has been thrown.
I do want to say something on what Ed said. Two things. When you spoke on the anime, the irony in all this too is that I don't know if people pay attention to it, but African Americans have been one of the largest, if not the largest, consumers of anime ever since the early 90s. I could speak on that because there used to be a group of us that would have to sneak into the library so we wouldn't be seen to discuss stuff like Vampire Hunter D and MD Geist and Ranma and, all these other ones. So that's one of those things that we never get, that never gets acknowledged when it comes from our side. And I agree with everything you said, man. I think it would be dope to get some Japanese people to do the English dub. Like, I think that would be hot. The other thing I wanted to speak on is with Disney, because I work with them a lot as well. And I would say, because the stuff I do for them is more from the veteran side, they're trying their best to get it right. And I see a lot of comments that would get placed on Disney about them. Oh, they feel bad because of all the backlash they faced and blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, they do. So because they're trying to right that wrong, there's a problem with it. So isn't that the point of criticism? Isn't that the point of saying something to these companies? And so they can acknowledge what they have been doing wrong and in hopes of them to fix it. So if people want to feel that, oh, they made a black Ariel because they're facing backlash, great. That means they listen. That means it mattered enough to them, to their bottom line and their product and their audience, that they're willing to make a change that might not be favorable to everybody else. And I'm sure there's still a lot of teeth pulling, like you said, Edward. There are things they're suggesting that you're kind of like, I'm not with that, but they are listening. And that's a lot better than what it used to be. If you can get someone to listen, then change and progress can be made, So yeah, I'm glad that you brought up Disney, because even with me working with them, I've noticed that it actually matters to them to get some things right.
I want to touch on two things. One, bringing up Little Mermaid. I know we've had the discussion about Disney just doing the bare minimum for diversity's sake. So it's like, great, awesome. Ariel's black, love it. Is that it? Is it just going to be her and her family? Is there everybody else? My kid wants attention. Oh my gosh. So it's baby, they can't see the picture. You did a good job though. There we go. Okay. All right. So yes, it's a step in the right direction, but of course they can always do more. So I guess, I don't know if the full cast has been like revealed or not yet, but I'm waiting for that moment to see what the rest of that cast looks like. Also I wanted to okay, I need you to please go watch TV. They're my children.
They're gonna take over your spot.
They always do. It never fails. I tell everybody, if you're ever on a Zoom with me, you'll know I have kids by the end of it. It's just the way of the world. But in terms of, authenticity in media, we have to think it's not only race related or LGBTQ related. I went to an event on Thursday where they talk about representation and how these like TV producers and everything like reveal their tell stories, because you have to think, how is abortion portrayed in movies and television? How is climate change, all of these issues, how are veterans and all of these things portrayed? So it's not only authenticity related to race or cultures, it's also about just general stories and all of these things that have a negative portrayal, that are portrayed negatively in media. And so it's like, we're like, yes, we're starting somewhere, but we can't forget about all the other aspects, because a lot of these issues like abortion, veteran, mental health, all of these things are largely centered around race. And it's a classism issue, a racism issue. So it's a lot of those things. So we have to think about those aspects as well.
And there are other companies, like there are some people that I'm dealing with in Activision Blizzard, and it's the same thing with them too. Like, they're really doing what they can to bring awareness. They have a lot of programs for veterans. They have initiatives to where they're bringing veterans in, not just on my side of the business, but on the production side of the business, and not just like quote unquote grunt work, but real positions, skilled positions. So there are companies, like them, Infinity Ward, that are doing that, and it is a slow process, and it's going to take time. and you're right, it has been at the minimum just to get people off their back. But I think as they're getting more people into these positions, the the shift is starting to change a little bit because now you're getting fresh people in positions to where the old-minded people were in there. And so things are starting to progress. But yeah, I agree with what you said.
I wanted to say too, like still on that same vein and kind of what you mentioned earlier, Ed, with like the am I asking for too much? Am I asking going like too far? Simple answer, no. Honestly, the simple answer is no. We're asking for not a lot. It's honestly just kind of the bare minimum whenever we're asking for, can we have more Japanese people in anime dubs? Can we have more African American people in video games? Can we have more of these people telling their own story and kind of like what Eli said, representing their own culture and having that actual diversity and not just, oh yeah, this is the black guy and he's the best friend sidekick character. He's here. He has three like 2 or 3 funny lines and that's how you know he's a great guy. But whenever we're asking these questions of like, can we push for more? Can we ask for more? Yes, because right now we're not even asking for a lot. We're just asking to be able to be ourselves and for our people to be represented and be around. It's not like we're asking for, all right, white people had their time, no more white people in anime, we want it all. We're asking like, hey, can we have a spot at the table too? That's it.
Exactly.
There's plenty of food
Yeah.
and there's tons of chairs. Can we just sit down at the table and eat?
But that kind of
Together.
goes also, it feeds into integrity and ethics as well, right? Because sometimes you get people that are in positions where they can ask these things, but for fear of losing out themselves, they don't.
Yeah.
Right? And we're talking about ethics and authentic representation. So round the board on the panel before we go into our Q&A, ethics and integrity. How do those two things filter into your everyday work in VO?
Who's going first? Me?
Who's
Go
going
for
first?
it. I was like, if you got
Okay.
something, I'll go. If not, go please.
Okay. All right. First, I now also left out Amazon Studios because I work with some people there too that are heavy on veteran initiatives. So I just wanted to put that out there too, that Amazon is really working hard to ramp up their initiatives for veterans too. With that being said, ethics and integrity to me is the make it or break it for you in this career, period. I'll say for me, the reason that I have built the clients that I have and the relationships I've had is because I'm very reliable. I do what I'm asked to do. If I am put to the task to do something or am requested to do something, I do what I say that I'm going to do. And I think that is an issue that that affects a lot of our people in this industry. I think that relationship building is essential for longevity in this. So just from my view, I think you know what the other thing too is, I think the competitiveness of things. All of us are competitive. We're in a business where we compete. The issue is that we tend to go at each other a lot to where it's almost like we step on each other to get somewhere or want to tarnish somebody to get somewhere where that's not even necessary. You know, I know there's situations that I have dealt with and situations that I have seen, and it's mind-boggling to me because I feel like we're all in the same race, trying to get to the same place to do the same thing. You know, yeah, this individual may be better at one thing, this individual may be better, but why exactly do we have to be stepped on? You know, I think if we could collectively get together and get a mindset, you know, yes, competition makes us better. I love being challenged, but that don't mean I got to knock you off to get to where I want to be, if that makes sense. You know, and that is a problem that I see. And that's something that people in the industry notice. You know, while we're talking about the progression and things that we want in this business, they also recognize that. And if they see that, that doesn't encourage them to want to progress with certain things because we are fighting amongst ourselves and pushing against ourselves and each other instead of lifting each other up so that we can all be on that same common ground.
Jazzy?
I was gonna say, like, trying to expand beyond like voiceover, right? Like we want it, circling back to the checks and balances of the industry, right? You have your casting directors, you have your directors, you have your voice actors, you have everybody else. So if, as long as somebody in that chain is able to say, no, this is what you should actually be doing, then, you know, it's there, the integrity, the, you know, all of it's just there. The issue is that we don't have enough of this diversity and representation behind the scenes. We're seeing, you know, voice acting itself, you know, expanding and becoming more inclusive and diverse. Yes, you guys see the tiny human that is not leaving me alone. But we need more behind to make these decisions and to help, you know, affect that change so that you don't have to rely on, I'm telling you, you know, like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Toto.
He's so cute though.
Thank you. Don't tell her that, but she already knows. You know, in a chain of 4 or 5 people, and 4 of them are white, you have to rely on one of those 4 people either fixing it or even starting off with the original, you know, like they're doing it right? So that bulk of it, that them being the majority in these processes is the problem, if we're being completely honest. And then I think people also forget change can happen, like adjustments. You can make things differently. We're finding now in our battle for diversity and inclusion is that now we're being pigeonholed and only being reached out to because we meet specific diversity requirements that they're looking for, right? Yeah, we're checking that box. So what we need to see is more open casting calls, just going out to diverse groups, like people that are just like, yeah, you know, we don't know what our characters look like yet. Let's just send this casting call out to the PGM VO list or the LGBT or QueerVox. You know, so it's like they can, oh great, we found the perfect voice for this character. Let's build this character around this voice actor, right? It's totally possible, but nobody ever thinks about those things. If you end up casting somebody for a character you do have like art for, it turns out they don't match a certain spec, really, you can adjust that. But also having to remember, I'm ranting, guys, I'm sorry, but also remembering that not everything a PGM does has to be rooted in their culture. If they're you know, Asian superhero, they didn't I had this conversation with Asian talent. They're like, we don't want this Asian superhero to only got their powers from the mystic dragon in their village, right? Like they just happen to also fall into a pit of radiation and now they have superpower, right? Like not every PGM needs to be rooted. Their culture needs to be who they are, their identity, or why things happen to them. They could just be regular Joe Schmo. Somebody said Harry Potter, but for PGM, right? Like they just kids going to school learning magic. So I ranted, I apologize, but yeah, that was a lot.
You felt like, I felt like you needed to get that out.
I did. I needed to release.
Let me ask you something, Jazzy, on something that you said. Don't you think that sometimes that when we do get people that's in that position, rather than doing what they can to open it even wider, they kind of capitulate the status quo to keep their position?
100%. Yes.
I see that.
Yes.
I'll see that sometimes where you'll have people that's in position to where you can make a difference. You can blow the door off this mug and get some other people in here, but instead you're capitulating to the status quo to maintain your position, you know? And so that's a problem that I see.
Yes. And honestly, that is, I think we have to recognize that advocacy is a privilege. Not everybody can continue to advocate, especially if you get to a certain position where what you say could either make or break your job, whether you have a job or not. And you can't really do anything, you know, to make change if you're not in that job. It's a very convoluted, like, ideal of like, watch what you say, but then at the same time, like, how else is change going to happen? So it's difficult. But yes, I think that's more, when that happens, it's more fear of losing where they, you know, like all the work they put in to get to where they are now. Yeah. So advocacy is a privilege. I excuse the cursing. I don't give a fuck. So I mean, I'll say whatever I want to say regardless. But not everybody has that right, and not everybody has that privilege, and that's okay. So come to me, let me know, and I'll say it for you. Okay, I have no problem. So
And that's
I
where the
think just
relationship building comes in.
yeah,
And
having
it's why I
those
said, like earlier,
people.
those relationships matter, because
Yeah.
you do have people that you can get in good with that will give you that air and allow you to bring suggestions to
Yes.
those that you can't do it to.
Exactly. Yeah. So let people figure out who are people in your community that will not be afraid to speak out, or say what needs to be said, or fight for whatever it is. Just don't fight against us at the end of the day. I think
That's
it's all
exactly
we're
what I'm
requesting.
saying.
It's all we're requesting,
Is exactly is, hey, we're all in this together. And whether if you will have people that have issue with you for little to nothing, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Nothing that you particularly said or did, but maybe because you move a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I get exactly what you're saying.
You can stay silent. I get it. You can't speak on everything, but just don't do the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Don't go against the agenda.
Thank you.
I think that leads us into our Q&A. We are right on time. Yes.
But
And
Edward
somebody
didn't get to
said
say
anything.
anything.
Huh?
Edward didn't get to say anything. Marcus didn't get to say anything.
Well, here's the thing, though. You have to know the thing about Edward and Marcus is sometimes if them sitting in silence is them saying a whole hell of a lot.
Got you.
It
Okay.
really is. It really is. Because sometimes I'll go to him before and I'll go, hey, Ed, what do you think? Ed be like, they said it all. I'm like, okay.
Hey, look,
well,
Ed's been entertaining to me. I just wanted to hear him.
come on, Ed. Come on, Ed. Feed the people what they
I will
want.
say this. I will say, I mean, like, I absolutely agree that, like, it is beneficial for all to when we support the cause. Like the most recent one that I saw some like discourse about was the movie that just came out with Viola Davis, The Woman King. And so I heard fantastic fucking movie, strong all black cast, like fucking amazing. But then I saw some discourse happening, like, how it was not historically accurate. Something about the Dahomey was like a slave trading African group, and then they glorified them in the movie. Something about that. But then, like, someone brought a very good point up, and was just like, how many white people movies have historically inaccurate information, and yet we celebrate it as if it was God's, given, God's gift on earth. And you have to think about it. You're like, tons of movies. Like the most recent, I think it was like The Greatest Showman. Like, was PJ Barnum as good looking as Hugh Jackman? Did he treat his wife as well as that movie did? Hell fucking no. PJ Barnum was a piece of shit. Like, that was like not even the case. Yet they made like one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a movie for a guy who rightfully doesn't deserve a movie like that. That's an example of, like, it's so far off the historically accurate chart, it's not even on the same planet. So here for The Woman King, where people are like, I'm going to boycott this movie because of one small detail. Yes, it does need to be looked at. It does need to be discussed. I'm not saying you should shut down all conversation. It is worth talking about. But I think it is more important to be like, okay, yes, that's unfortunate, but what does the movie do well? What is the good of this movie? And I think when you think about it, the good of, for example, The Woman King, it far outweighs the bad, like in terms of what this movie is trying to accomplish. So I just say the same things for others. And that being said, it doesn't mean that you cannot have critical discourse. Like if there is, let's say, a movie that has an extremely problematic individual that, like, I know, what was it? Oh God, I forgot his name. The actor who wrote and starred in Birth of a Nation. Like, I know he had a lot of controversy because the rape charges that he had, and all that stuff. It was pretty bad. And it was like, was it worth talking about? Yes, it is worth mentioning because it is a very serious nature. And some people argue, don't bring
Ezra Miller. Sorry.
Ezra Miller. I mean, but I think it's like, it is important that you do need to bring up, there are problems. Yes, like for example, Raya and the Last Dragon. It was a movie about Southeast Asians, and yet most of the main characters were voiced by East Asians. That was a problem. And so we talked, and I know the Asian community fought about it, and some was like, don't fight it because, you're supposed to support the big cause. And yes, I agree with that, but you have to understand that, like, in the Asian community, Southeast Asians are like, they're on the bottom scale of power, like in terms of representation, in terms of voice. They're at the very bottom. So they don't get, it's strange because Asians are such a monolithic, gigantic beast that like people confuse like what is Asian exactly, but it is such a complex, diverse group of people that so much get lost in the shuffle. So when we talk about Vietnamese people or Filipino people, they are nowhere near the same as like Chinese or Korean or Japanese people. They're not the same whatsoever. So when a movie had them being voiced by a bunch of East Asians, and then the problem Disney had, and they realized this too, they were pushing that it was a Southeast Asian story. And then they realized that the celebrities they hired, like Gemma Chan or like Aquafina, like they couldn't promote them as much because they're like, wait a minute, they're not Southeast Asian. We can't promote them. And so I heard from the internal sources that Disney was like, oh shit, we can't really promote this movie well because our marketing went off the wrong way. Do they acknowledge this mistake? I think they have. I think they, there are things they're doing to acknowledge that. And, especially when you deal with a gigantic corporation like Disney, mistakes are going to happen. Like it's just going to happen. So I think just to finalize on this is just like, it is important to support, but it is important to have these critical discourses, mind you, respectfully. Like, I think there's no value in being like, oh, they suck. Like they fucking suck. Like, okay, but why do they suck? Like, what is it about it that sucks? As opposed to just saying, oh, it's terrible. Like you have to give me more critical or constructive value input than just that. So I think it's like our communities, I think every community will have their own infighting. Like when I hear about the LGBTQ community, there's, the infighting that happens all the fucking time about what is proper representation, who gets more representation, or like Asians and who gets more representations, or even within Black community, or something that's reflective of all PGM is colorism. Like why, these are very light-skinned people. You never see darker skinned people. Like, I saw one Black person commenting, I'm glad that Ariel is Black, but they chose a very light-skinned person. And I'm like, I get what you're saying, because it's like, if Ariel was like a really, really dark actress, how much more amazing that'd be. You can see something that's that dark. But
and I think the reason why there's an argument within our community with that is because, and I apologize for interrupting you.
Oh yeah,
it's because darker skinned people tend to be vilified more. So
yeah.
it's like if you look at some of Tyler Perry's stuff, one of the bigger complaints earlier on is the fact, why is the good guy always light skinned and the bad guy is dark skinned? So within our community, it's like, if you, the argument with the lighter Ariel is because she couldn't be darker because it's not close enough to the whiteness of the character. That's what I'm hearing with some of the people. And it's like you said, it's always this infighting. And even within our own people, there's infighting about darker people and lighter skinned people, so it's this ongoing war.
It is. And it's like, I think it is important to hear them out. And I appreciate those who acknowledge their privilege. Like I know Zendaya talks about her light skin privilege all the time. So I appreciate when celebrities do acknowledge it, like I probably got ahead because I was lighter skinned, and there's no denying that. So I think it's like, especially with actresses as young as because she's like, what, 25? People who are as young as them, consciously aware of their situation, tells me like, with all the shit that's going on this planet, there are good people. There are good people who are aware of their situation and are trying to find ways to improve it. And I think that's what we can all do in our own little way, even if it's very tiny. It's just like, what can we do to shift the pendulum a little more forward for not only our respective community, but for all? Like, how do we benefit all in that sense?
And I think it's a very difficult battle because it circles back to like, who is best for the role, right? And at the end of the day, it's not that we should be looking at, but who got these opportunities, who received the audition. So it starts at, were they the best person for the role, but did these other people even get the chance to get that audition? So did the darker skin actors only get the villain auditions, the villain sides, or did they get it for, all the whole cast, you know what I mean? So I think we don't need to look, we need to focus more on the start of the process versus where we ended up, because it really truly comes down to, did they get a chance?
That's a good point.
versus did they get cast?
Very good point. Because, you know, darker skinned women for the longest time have always been looked at as not being beautiful.
Mhm.
You know, it is now that I think they're starting to showcase more darker skinned women, you know, in ads and in shows to show that dark skinned women are very beautiful, you know. But yeah, I agree with that. Did they even get a chance? You know, did a dark skinned sister get a chance for that? You know, so I think that's a great point, Jazz.
Have y'all
That's one
seen
thing I did love about the Ed, you mentioned the Zendaya thing. For a while, I don't know if it was just like a small pocket or what happened, but people were comparing Zendaya and Kiki Palmer for some reason. And I don't know how that started. Don't
Because they
ask
just
me
wanted
how it
something to
started.
argue about.
And
Yeah, and they were like, well, Kiki Palmer has to work twice as hard as Zendaya because Zendaya's light skinned. And what I appreciated is that Zendaya went, yeah, they're right. Like,
Full stop.
yeah, and like, and I mean, I've said that too. Like, anytime we get into conversations about white privilege or anything like that, people are always like, well, do you have white privilege because you're half white? I'm like, yes, dude. Like, I have said it all the time. Like, even it was very evident for me growing up in comparison to, so I have two sisters. We share a father. We do not share a mother. They're full black. I'm half black. Just even in like growing up and seeing how we're all three the same kids living in this house, but my sisters are treated way differently than me. Like just by society as a whole, like how our neighbors would treat us, how like police in the neighborhood would treat us. And if you don't acknowledge that light-skinned people tend to have it easier, you're a fucking asshole, because they do. And when it comes down to like the integrity side of things, one thing that if you're in the group chat with us, you know, for some reason everyone thinks I'm very racially ambiguous. I don't know why. But it comes down to that checks and balances system that Jazzy mentioned, whereas I'll get auditions for a lot of things that I do not fit the specs for. And so, yes, we want it to start off in a better place of like, who are we sending these sides to? Who are we giving these opportunities to? But then sometimes it does come down to you as an individual to take a step back and say, this isn't for me. I don't fit this. And like Eli, you said something about it where you had a buddy say, hey, this role's not for me, but do you want to take a crack at it?
Yeah.
And that, to me, if someone has the fortitude to do that, it's the dopest thing ever. Because I had one not that long ago, recently. It was for a like cartoon movie, kind of like Pixar-ish. And it was based on Tibetan culture or like Tibetan folklore. It was like some kind of like I don't even know what the story was,
like
but to me I was like, well, probably the only person I'll audition for is like a monster role, because I'm not Tibetan. And even then I was like, do I even want to submit for like one of the monsters? Because like, this isn't my story, this isn't part of my culture. Like, should I even be a part of it? And I think if more of us start doing that as well, as opposed to just, oh shit, an opportunity, gonna send for that right now, regardless of if I fit or not, I think that will also help us take that step in the right direction. Because the checks and balances, we would like them to come from the production end, but they don't always. So that's when we have to step up and do checks and balances as well. And when it comes to, if you are in the production side and you're like, I'm afraid to speak up because I might lose my job, just be indispensable. Honestly, be so good at what you do that it is very hard for them to get rid of you when you raise a fuss. Because I do that at my day job. They fucking hate me over there because I raise a stink about a lot of stuff that's going wrong. But I am wildly good at my job. So they're like, well, shit, we're not going to fire Marcus because Marcus takes care of X, Y, and Z, and nobody else knows how to do that, or nobody else is as good as it. So we'll just hold on to them until they decide to leave or until they fuck up too bad to get kicked out. But as it is, there's a lot of positive changes in our workplace because I'm constantly like, no, that's not fucking right. Don't do that. And yeah, they think I'm an asshole. And yeah, they might want to get rid of me, but I'm so good at what I do, they can't. But at the same time, protect your peace and your mental health. If you don't have the fight in you that day, nobody is going to downcast you because you just didn't have it in you. Because the fight, we should always be fighting, but not at the sacrifice of your own mental health and your well-being. So while I'm always an advocate of people speaking up, I want you to know it's okay to not do it every time if it's sacrificing your well-being. You don't have to put your body on the line for me. If you do, dope. That's super duper nice of you. And like Tanesha said, I want an accomplice, not an ally. But at the same time, take care of yourself.
And that's
I'll stop
across the
ranting
board,
now.
man. No, and that's across the board. I've turned down VO projects just because for my peace of mind, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I've had clients like, you're going to turn down money? Like, yeah, because I don't want to do it. I'm kind of at a place now where I have enough work to where I could turn some things away. You know, it's for my peace of mind. Like, I don't want to do it. I don't need the money that bad right now. You know,
Not all
your
money is
mental
good
health
money.
matters. Exactly. Not all money is good money, Tanesha.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're struggling that bad and you're not around, what's more important? Me speaking up this one time or doing something this one time, or me being here to see another day? Protect your peace, everybody. I'll tell that to you all the time. Fight the good fight, but you don't have to be a martyr.
There was an actor who just asked me like, what is the right course? Like they know what their answers, but so they were offered to audition for a role that was an LGBTQ Mexican character, and they're neither. Like they are PGM, but they are not Mexican or LGBTQ, and they didn't know what to say about them. And they worked with the director before. The director really wanted them to audition for it, and they're like, "What do you think is the right course of action?" And I was like, "Look, you know what my answer is going to be, but I think." Here's what you can do, because the fact that the additions for someone who you worked with before, they really like you want to maintain that relationship. So I think, my theory is that, like, look, in the end, as long as it doesn't go to a white voice actor, we're good. Like this is, that's like the bare minimum step. But what you can also do to advocate is that you will turn in your audition, but tell the director, who is your friend, to go find LGBTQ Mexicans. Go find them. So they audition you, and they audition for like the actors that fit the role better. And I think that's why, because it's like they also were saying when Eli, you were saying that you're at a place where like I can turn down these jobs, and this person was telling me I am not in that position. I am broke. Like if I get this job, this will help me. And I'm like, shit. Like I can't tell you to turn down a job, especially if it's going to give you good money. Like, it's going to help you pay rent. So it's like, where is your integrity line? That I think, it's always a case by case scenario. And I say, look, in the end, like, I think you should still audition for it, still show up, do your thing, do the professional thing, but also to be an advocate, go find them. Hey, I got these people in mind too, so that, the director has that choice as well. And I think that's what we can do, where it's like, if I get auditions for a Southeast Asian character and they're like, look, Edward, we looked at the PGM VO list and we know that, we want that, let's say, Burmese actor or Thai actor, but there just isn't that many of them. Like there really isn't. And which is true compared to like all the Asian voiceover actors, like East Asians are like the highest in terms of the sheer amounts there is. So it's like, in the end, Edward, we'd rather hire an Asian actor like you than not. And I'm like, great. But then I'll go, but here's a few Burmese actors I think would be great. Please audition them. And then if you go, oh man, they were not good, which could be possible, and you have to absolutely offer me the part, then we'll discuss. We'll discuss if this is the bridge that we're on now. So I think it's just like everything can be a case by case scenario, but I think we can always find a way to advocate for others, or what I always like to say, to pass the mic to others. Like, how can you do that so that they all have the opportunity to do so? And if someone's just so wildly like off, they're like, oh, Edward, can you audition for this African-American character? I'm like, okay, I'm not even going to audition for this. Please go find other people. There's a lot of them out there. Trust me, there's a lot. You'll find them.
Yeah, it's like one of the questions that came in asking how difficult is it to find voiceover artists that have specifications for projects that call for authenticity, even with the PGM and VOC and QueerVox. And my answer to them was, it's actually not as nearly as difficult as it may seem, except for when the audition gets to be very, very specific, like the one that we had that came in where they wanted someone that spoke Brazilian Portuguese, not Angolan Portuguese, not the Portuguese that's spoken in Portugal, specifically Brazilian Portuguese with a Sao Paulo accent, and they had to sound like Pele. That is you're looking for a purple unicorn that shit sprinkles. I get it. But guess what they found? They found a purple unicorn that shit sprinkles. So it's not as difficult. People say, oh, well, we didn't even know PGM VO List even existed, or it's difficult to find. No, it's not. All you have to do is ask the right people. You're not asking the right questions is the problem. Or the things you just don't want to. You're being lazy.
That, and also that kind of like raises a red flag for me, because I see all of us blasting that stuff all the time. So whenever it's like, man, I just couldn't find any black voice actors, I'm like,
You're lying.
yeah, you only talk to white people, don't you? Like, I know for a fact you only talk to white people if you're struggling that hard to find a single black voice actor.
And it also means that you don't have that one black friend.
Yeah,
You know, that one black friend, that token black man that
You
you
don't
have.
even got
you don't have that
tokens?
black sidekick that has
Yeah.
the 3 lines for comedic effect.
You can't find them. You didn't go ask them. You didn't ask a black friend. You know, on this episode of Ask a Black Friend, you didn't go ask somebody. You think that one black person you know doesn't know other black people? Do we all know each other? No. Will we call a meeting? Yes.
We ain't no cousins. But
Somebody knows somebody that knows somebody.
right? And I think we talked about this before in terms of like, if they're asking for a lot, like, you know, if they're looking for a lot of specific things, maybe not, you know, you might only find 2 people, and yeah, those 2 people might not be good actors, you know, maybe not right for the part, because we know that's how this industry is. But then you just slowly start, you try to match up as many as you can, versus like, oh, I couldn't find a LGBTQ, half Mexican, half Black voice actor with a Jamaican accent. So what am I? Yeah, you know, there's, you know, and so it's like, oh, I couldn't find that, so we'll just cast him as white. You know, like that's just like, what? Come on. So it's like, if you just like, all right, cool. We found somebody that's half Black, half Mexican, and LGBTQ. They don't have Jamaican accent, but that's okay. They don't need it. We can adjust the story. So it's like, as long as you try and match up as many, like as many of those specs as you can. It's not that hard. It's not.
Yeah, it's not that hard to adjust because you're right. That's what they did on Superfuse. Once they brought me on board and asked my thought on it, they changed the script. They altered some of the dialogue to fit me. You know, so it can be done. It's just, do they want to? You know, do you want to? You know, yeah, some of it's lazy. They didn't really try. You know, some of them didn't really try.
Question for you, Eli. Terry Briscoe has asked us, that you mentioned about, you know, your work with Disney and with, you know, veterans and so forth, and your work on Starship Troopers. And they want to know, do you feel that it's important to have veterans that have combat experience in these roles, or just veterans in a general way involved to ensure authenticity?
That's a good question. I think it depends on what the role calls for. So if it's someone, if the character is a combat soldier, you definitely want someone that's been in combat and that's a soldier, because they're going to bring the realism to that character, you know. And that's part of a discussion that I have with one of the gentlemen that I deal with in Amazon and Activision. That's something that is being worked on and looked at from their end. But again, they have a huge veteran initiative, but there's also a vetting process they have to go through with that as well. You know, you have to have an honorable discharge, and there's other things that you have to go along with it. But yeah, I think depending on what the character's role is will determine what's best needed for that role. You know, so I think if you do have, you know, a character that is, it's battle, you want someone that's kind of been in the trenches or has been in that environment as a soldier. You know, if you're a soldier that has not been in that type of situation, you may not have the same type of response. You may not say things the same way that, an engineer may have or someone from infantry may have. So yeah, I think that it does matter, and usually when we see games like that, you have different types of soldiers in these games too. So I think that, those that represent each part of, the military in these games, cast those that fit those specific parts. What if it's combat? What if it's a person that's administrative who has never seen action? Because, I have been, I got deployed when I was in the military. I was in Bosnia, Herzegovina. I actually saw a lot of action. It was boring a little bit, but there was some action there too. But there's some things I probably wouldn't be able to do if the character is administrative, because I don't know all of the lingo. I don't know all of the acronyms that are used, for that part of, of a soldier. So yeah, I think it does matter.
Jazzy had a question. Jazzy, I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh.
You
asked this,
ask her a question.
we asked this question. Well, no, it's because I want to see what meme she's going to put in the background.
Okay, let me get ready.
Because we have this conversation every time. Have you ever had to explain the Black sound and how there really isn't one overall way to sound like a certain ethnicity?
No, I don't think I have. I'm trying to think, have I ever had to explain the Black sound?
When somebody says you don't sound Black enough, or you need to be more quote unquote.
Oh, that shit. Okay. Yeah, but I've had to do that in real life too. Like, that's just not VO related. That's life related, and oftentimes I find it more in our culture than anyone else's, that we tend to get chastised for the way that we talk. If you speak and articulate yourself very well, then you sound very white. That's how it's said, as opposed to just being an educated Black person. But then if you speak it with a lot of slang and a lot of, you know what I mean, things like that, now you're just really hood and you're too damn Black. So I haven't had to do it, to be honest, not in VO. Like I said, with Superfuse, there are some things that we tweaked and adjusted to fit the character, and they didn't have anything like that in there where it was just on some real gangster shit. But I've had to deal with that more outside of VO than I have in VO or in the business, for me personally.
Yeah, I'm getting sick of code switching. Like, can you make it sound more urban? And I'm the first one to pop back. Please ask the client what they mean by more urban. Can you give me an example?
You
and
do
then
it.
I get radio
Show
silence.
me what you mean.
Yeah, somebody's like, do it for me, so that I can understand what you hear in your head.
I don't think I really haven't. Like, I'm thinking of all this. I'm playing all the sessions, a lot of the sessions and stuff that I've done. I don't think I've actually had that.
That makes me happy to hear.
Yeah,
really makes me happy to hear.
I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm some anomaly, but I'm thinking on sessions that I've done, and I don't think I've had that happen. Like, I've seen in the specs urban, I've seen it in the specs, but once we get into the session and I deliver it the way that I see it, I don't think I've had that said to me. And it might come to me later, and I might have to text in the group like, there was an instance, but right now I really just can't think of it.
Seriously, that makes me really happy. I already told y'all what I'm going to say next time somebody tells me to sound more Black. So, it's one of those things.
Well, I wasn't.
You've had someone say that to you? Like, you've had someone say sound more Black?
Oh yeah, like, can you sound more Black, please?
Same.
Yeah.
It happens a lot for me in North.
Or can you sound more urban?
More urban.
Urban, more sassy.
The one I get is people will be like, "Oh, well, I thought you were biracial." I'm like, "Yeah, I am." They're like,
what?
"Well, you don't sound very Black." I'm like, I sound exactly how I fucking sound. This is how I talk. Like,
it's a big debate, and I'm gonna preface this before I say it, y'all. I again don't give a fuck about life. Next time somebody says that to me, I'm gonna say, "Oh, you want A, not hard R." Got it. And then it's gonna, I have thoughts and feelings, and I say things and I don't care, but it's one of those things.
Wow.
It's one of those things. You're tired of hearing it, because I am one of the ones. My mom is white, Indigenous, and Black, and we grew up in Montana, and all my family up there is white. I was the only Black kid there, so like, it should say a lot, right? talk hood. I don't talk, quote unquote ghetto, whatever it is. So whenever it is a call when they're like, yeah, can you sound more black? And I'm like, Mommy, I am black. I always sound black. It's who I am. This is what this
You
is
know
what
what?
it is. There is no one black sound. It's crazy.
And maybe because when they talk to me, they see me and they hear how I talk, that question doesn't come to mind for them. So maybe because of my presence, they haven't said that, because I'm that type of dude that I'm going to check you. So I can't say that I've had that happen. I've seen it in specs and auditions, but I haven't had that happen to me in a session.
Yeah, and that's awesome, because it's like, it's not going to happen anymore, but it was always Tiffany Haddish as the reference. And she is the universal black sound for black women. And if it's more of a serious or, like a dramatic role or read, it's always Viola Davis. Because for some reason, those are the two standards of how a black woman should sound. Are you hood or are you not? Those are your two. And it's like, there is no, I'm confused of why you think this is. And why it's a standard for, what is it for black men? It's Kevin Hart. And there's another one. I can't.
Idris Elba is one.
Idris Elba, and things like that. It's like, man, that man is British. Okay, I don't even know what you talking about. You want me? Whatever.
That's crazy.
It's, and honestly, I don't think I see it as much in in character auditions. It's always commercial commercial centered auditions where they use those as the reference. I was fairly shocked and fairly surprised. I did an audition yesterday where they were looking specifically for a black woman in the specs, but the reference was Tina Fey. And I was like, yes, thank you.
I saw that. I got that same one. I'm like,
thank you. And I was like, that's it. I love that. It's not about, this is what a black person should sound like. We're referencing Tina Fey from this show. And I'm like, yes. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. That's it. That's all it is.
The other one that comes up now for anytime it's like a black man is, oh my God, I just instantly blinked on his name. Sam Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony Mackie. I'll see that one all the time for commercial reads where it's like, RVO should have an easygoing demeanor, but he's got a calm coolness to him. Someone you'd want to get a beer with after work, like Anthony Mackie. Like,
that's not who I want to drink beer with, but okay, go off then.
Do you guys only know? Have you guys only seen like 2 black people in the world that you're like?
Yes, they've only seen 2 black people. We get Regina King. It's Viola Davis, Regina King, and then if you want somebody urban or hood, it's Tiffany Haddish. And I get it for commercial, but even the stuff that I booked that aren't auditions that I get booked for, and it's always out of North Carolina, where that's what they want. And I'm sitting, and I will go back, explain to me what urban and what you're looking for. Oh, never mind. 2 hours later, never mind. Just do it the way you see fit.
Yep.
I was going to do that any goddamn way, but okay.
Yes. As soon as you check them, are like, give me an example. They're like, well, just do a couple takes and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
It's funny because on the Asian side, especially for Asian women, what they get a lot is, I'm just going to say it the way I should have said it. Dasani or tap water is the name that we get. And I get like in the PGM VO list, well, I'll have actresses of Asian descent message us or email us like, hey, what do they mean they want someone like Aqua? Does that mean they want the black scent that comes with it? And that's always been like a big, we didn't know. We didn't know. I was like, I don't know, because it's like, that's how Dasani got her career, like sounding like a black woman. That's how she's got her career. Like that's how she started off. And that's what she's known for. So when clients or commercial agencies are looking for it, and it's been popping up a lot now, like especially, someone who sounds like Aquafina. And now the question is, do they want the black scent to come with it? Or do they just want the raspiness of her voice? And it's unclear, because it's like, I do see some of the spots, and then I realize that some of them have veered towards into where they sound like urban, but they wanted an Asian person to sound urban because it's like the new hip thing to do for Hollywood, where like, oh, we want someone who sounds black but isn't exactly black at all. Oh my gosh. So that has been an issue where it's just like, you have someone who I think is problematic in community, because that's how she got her career profiting off of cultural appropriation. And I know there's like a massive debate on that, but the truth of the matter is that's how she got started. So it's kind of like when you have a reference to that, what does that mean? And I think that's been an issue of like, it sucks that when what we're talking about, when they only use one person as a reference, why not give us a range? Why not give us someone that doesn't have to be Asian? Like, like the Tina Fey thing, like that's great. It's like there are tons of people out there. They're like, oh, like I remember seeing one. They're like, they were like there was an Asian guy audition, but he sounds like Sam Rockwell, and I'm like, nice, I love that. I know exactly what that sounds like because he has a very distinct personality, and that's great because it doesn't always have to be like, oh, this particular ethnicity. And I wish casting was more imaginative about that. I know you're trying to be authentic and inclusive, but when it comes to voice reference, you can be more diverse. Like you can be like, okay, I want a range of like, let's say a little blend of Ethan Hawke and maybe a little bit of like Randall Park. And it's like, okay, that's something. That's a very different eclectic mix, but I kind of get what you're going for with that. So it's kind of like you can use different ethnicities and it doesn't have to be the one that the spec is based on.
I was going to say, you kind of mentioned it. I had one the other day where it was a commercial for a bank. All right. So like your friendly neighborhood town and country bank kind of deal. But the references were, oh, it's always easygoing, laid back, like your neighbor delivering advice kind of thing. But the references were Kevin Hart or Idris Elba. And I was like, what the fuck do you want from me? Those men are so wildly different. It sounds so wildly different. What?
But after all that, do you see when the commercial comes out that it's nothing like the specs you were given?
Oh, we're fucking close.
No.
Yeah. I have received auditions to where they would have certain specs in there. And, if I didn't land it, I'll see the commercial. And it's nothing like the specs. Like, far from it.
That's why I'm constantly, so like a lot of the times, and this is kind of like circling back to the competition side of VO, but like not stepping on someone else. If someone else gets a role over me, I'm hyped for them. I love that shit. If me and Ed and Eli all audition for the same thing, Eli, if you book it, I'm going to be hyped for you, man. Yeah. But I'm also on the competition side of it. When it comes out, I'm going to listen to how you did it. Like, okay, why did Eli get this over me? This is an opportunity for me to learn, grow, and improve. But then when it's like the specs are so specific, and then you hear who got it, like, oh, I didn't get this commercial. Oh, the commercial came out. I want to hear the guy that beat me. I want to hear how he did it. I'm like, this is not at all.
Look,
this does not sound like
Kevin Hart. That's my point. Like, that wasn't in my specs.
Yeah, you
like,
just gotta,
I don't care who gets it.
You just gotta learn that voiceover is like whose line is it anyway? Where voiceover, where there are auditions and the specs don't matter, right? Man. Like it just at the end of the day, it's just you do what you gotta do.
To the point where I'm like, did they not want me to get this, so they sent me different specs from everyone else? Like, is that were they like, oh, we'll be nice and send Marcus something, but let's tell them sound like Kevin
That's
Carter.
What it was. They were like, hey, let's change these references real quick. Give me 2 black people. Kevin Hart and Idris Elba. That's it. Perfect.
And then the client's like, actually, we wanted someone to sound like Tom Hanks. So I don't know what this guy is doing at all.
I get to the point where I'm actually ignoring the specs. I look at them and go, oh, that's nice. And then I go and I do what I do.
I had a coach.
I'll still do what I do, and I'll put their spec at the end. If I'm doing 2 to 3 takes, I'm going to do what feels right as an actor. And then, I'm going to give you what you asked for, but it's going to be after what my interpretation of it is. And that's what I'm finding that is working for me. I screw them specs.
Mm-hmm. I do the like character description or their like or like their bio if it's like an actual character.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, how do I think that this person would sound based off of the fact that this guy is a bartender that works way too many hours. So he's got like kind of a tired, like fed up disposition to him. Sound like Kevin Hart or Idris Elba. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to ignore that part.
Real sick of y'all right
but
now.
I'm going to do that. I am going to do that bartender that works way too many hours and is probably like a little short with people, sounds like he's running on 2 hours of sleep. I'm going to do that, and those are the ones I land.
Yeah.
So
Before we answer, I see your question there. I wanted to touch back on, having like when you have veterans do, like VA and stuff like that. I honestly think we need to, bring up more like consultations just in general in voiceover, because if you look at on camera acting and on screen acting, there are actors that go, either like the community, or they consult with people who were like maybe in the job that their character is playing. So it's like, why can't we do the same thing in voiceover, right? So it's like, oh, this is a character, like, all right, yeah, just a regular character, was a war vet, works in a bank. You go, talk to somebody, or have like, I honestly think we need to have more of that, because at the end of the day, everybody preaches voice acting is acting, big A, little V, but it's like, we're not treating it the same. And, in an ideal world, diversity isn't a word, because everything is equal and even, and everybody can play anything and everybody, right? So in an ideal, like in a world, it'd be like, yes, a white person can voice a Black character, or a Black character can voice a Mexican character, but we have the nice added benefit of talking to that culture, right? Like, yeah, you may have been the best voice, but I don't know anything about this. So let me go ahead and be with people, like all these things. I don't know.
especially in the time of the internet. Like it's easier now than ever before to reach out, ask somebody. And like I always say, in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. Like if you're ignorant about something, at first, that's not a bad thing. Like if you don't know until someone tells you, or until you get educated. But you can also go out there. We have supercomputers in our pockets at all times that I can just Google something. Like,
my family and I, we were out the other week, and we drove past the library, and I told my kids in the back seat, I said, how we used to have to do homework? Right there. We spent weekends, you had to get a library card, and we would spend our weekends sitting at a damn table with books, stacks of books to research and write notes.
The encyclopedias, boy.
You got the thesaurus, y'all got Google. We didn't have Google.
We had a card catalog. You had a card catalog, a piece of paper, and that little miniature golf pencil. And you told the book you need is on that shelf.
I remember our encyclopedia set, right? Like, I'm like, oh my God.
You had an encyclopedia set?
We had that encyclopedia set. Y'all, I don't know if y'all young or not, but if y'all don't know, y'all have it so good right now. Look, I want to say, because it's like, it's not even like, again, checks and balances. It's not even just about voice actors going out and talking to the people like the actors do. Production. I remember we were watching Moana, and they have, like a behind the scenes after, and they were talking about how they went to the islands, how they went to New Zealand, and what actually had people of the culture working on the back end so that they got it right, because the creators were both white dudes, right? So they actually put in the work to have the correct people consult on this project. So it's not even, I get it, it's a big name movie and all that fun stuff, but it's not, for some reason, the voice acting world, video game world, character world just doesn't put that same amount of work into it, even on the back end, behind the scenes. Because I get it, we don't have the big budget that like Pixar may have, but you could still put in that work, and it doesn't have to be like expensive, and you don't have to be a big name. If you know somebody that's like, hey, I can only pay them like $100, but I know like you are of this culture. Would you mind like participating or helping out, volunteering your time so that we could do it right? One of the indie animations I'm on did that exact thing. They were like, we don't know anything about the culture or like their wardrobe in this culture. They reached out to me, like, hey, do you mind if we post in the Discord asking for somebody of this descent so that we could accurately, draw the wardrobe? And I was like, obviously the answer is yes, so go for it. So it's like the work, I get it, finances, whatever, but the work is still there, and there are people out there that are willing to tell their stories. And you don't have
And I
to
mentioned that earlier.
$100.
I apologize.
No, you're good.
And I'm and I mentioned that earlier. Like some of them, they are trying. You know, Raw Fury, Stitchheads, they did that with me. There are other people that are trying, and it's new to them. You know, it's one of those new things to them where they're not accustomed to doing it. You know, but once they see one company doing it, other companies are like, hey, it's a pretty good idea. You know, let's reach out to so and so, or let's get a a liaison, somebody that can help assist us with this. And they can actually, this is part of what I talked about at GDOC. Once you have the character in mind and the voice talent in mind, and you bring them on, you're actually saving yourself money as a company. Because if you get that voice actor that's representing that culture, they can tell you everything you need to know. So you're actually saving money if you hire the proper talent and consult with them. You know what I'm saying?
And even like circling back to, if you have no idea what this character looks like and you cast first, you can build that character off of that voice actor, and they already have all the knowledge you will ever need for that specific character. But again, don't make every PGM character based in culture, y'all. Again, we just want random ass, PGM that got random ass powers from a random ass thing like radiation, whatever, right? So
radiation is just randomly running around and turning people
I
into
don't know how these superheroes got into this, these situations, but it happens. They're
In the comic book world, yeah,
situations.
there's radiation everywhere.
everywhere.
Everything is radiated.
Marcus looks dead serious too. Marcus is like, everywhere. There's radiation.
It's a serious problem. That's one thing that made me laugh so hard in Spider-Man No Way Home, was whenever someone was like, how'd you get your powers? He's like, oh, I fell in this. And then, how'd you get your powers? Like, oh, I fell in a vat of electric eels. And Jamie Foxx's character's like, man, we got to stop falling into shit.
So yeah, it's just give us random things. But if you are going to base a culture or a character in culture, start at the source. Have a voice actor that can either authentically portray or build a character. You don't always need to have a character built first, y'all. Just saying,
Build a character like Build-A-Bear.
Build-A-Bear, yo.
Hey, I just built a bear and I named him Soju. So that's
I saw that too.
I built a bear and I named him Soju. So like I said, it doesn't matter. Start from the bottom. We have a 3-pronged question as we get ready to wrap up. Not necessarily geared towards, our authentic representation piece, but 3-pronged question. 1, who are the voice actors you admire and why? Please keep that one brief because I know there's a whole lot of them out there. What do you do to get, quote, into character? Marcus, you actually covered this when you were talking about specs. And then what do you do when you work with your clients to help them to realize their vision? I like the last one of the 3. They're all good questions, but I think the third one kind of really speaks to what we've been talking about here. Let's start with Marcus because he looks very pensive.
Okay. So am I only answering the third one?
You can answer any of the questions that you would like. They're in the Q&A that we can see. So pick one. How about that?
All right. Phil Lamar a lot. Do to get into character. Fun thing to try and do is sing as that character. Just sing a song as that character. I don't know why. 1, it'll help loosen you up. 2, if you can maintain singing as that character over a wide range of the song, and if you find that there's parts where you're like, oh, I dropped out there, maybe that's not the voice to go with. Like if you have a voice where it's like you can't yell as them or you can't whisper as them or something like that, you're going to have a hard time doing it for the whole production. So try singing as them. It'll loosen you up. It's a good exercise, and it helps you stay and maintain in that. What do I do to work with clients to help them realize their vision? For me, it's honestly about what the thing I always say to myself in my mind is, how can I make this so that when it's done, it's something my friends would want to watch, and not just because I'm in it, but they want to watch it because it's actually good. So like if it's an anime or something like that, I don't want them to watch that anime only because I'm in that anime. I want them to watch that anime because shit's dope. Like shit is fire. We're all talking about it in the Weeb chat and it's hot. Or like a video, or like the video game. Like I want them to talk about it because the shit is dope, not because I'm in it. And so I think if you're trying to just give that all, to whatever production you're in, whether it be a commercial or a video game, anime, dubbing, whatever. If you give it that all and just genuinely do your best to make it a good product, because landing the role, it's like, yeah, you got there, but you still got to act, man. Like, you still got to do all of that. So give it your all. Just try and make it dope as shit. And that's going to help your client have a dope as shit product too.
Sweet.
What if you
Popcorn over
can't
to the
sing at
villain.
all, Marcus?
Oh
What if
yeah.
you can't sing at all?
Buddy,
What
I
if you can't hit a note?
I cannot. I had an audition that they wanted a singing sample. They actually wanted a singing sample, but in your natural voice.
Yeah.
I did a Cake song. So I did Short Skirt, Long Jacket, and it's just that man talking. That's the song. And my agent was like, all right, I see what you did there. I doubt they're going to give that to you. But it was like, you need a singing sample? I want a girl with a mind like a diamond. I want a girl who knows what's best. And that was it. Just that monotone shit the whole time. And the singing doesn't have to be good. It's just a fun exercise. And for me, at least, I'll end up laughing at myself. So it gets me out of my head, because I have a problem where I will overthink way too much. And so I'll do a take and I'm like, that sounded too tired. I'll do the take again, like, oh, he sounded a little too angry there. I'll do it again. But if I get out of my own head and I just try to like deliver the lines with some very good clarity and feel that emotion, like punch that shit in. If I sing beforehand, I'm more natural about it and more relaxed, and I'm not as stiff and rigid. And I think it comes out better for me. Now, that's not a fix for everybody. I'm just saying it's something I do. So
Okay, popcorn over to somebody next.
you,
Oh, I wasn't prepared for that.
I know, and that's exactly why I did it.
Oh, you raggedy subs. And now I don't even remember my own questions. I have to go back to my own questions. Dag nabbit, you're gonna pay for this later, just so you know that. You're gonna pay for this later. Oh, I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you. Voice actors that I admire. Cree Summer is my top. Absolutely. Been listening to her since I was a kid. And I fangirl out every time she likes one of my tweets and then retweets it. I fangirl out and I pass out a little bit. And I'm not known to do those sorts of things. How do I get into character? I literally create something inside my own head. I look at the spec and then I pull from people that I know, from my own experience, and I create this character, and I literally what it looks like in my head. And believe it or not, I will actually sketch it out a little bit. Now, mind you, my stick people do not even, they're lopsided. The heads aren't quite round. The arms are a little bit different and wonky, but that's okay. They're special. So I create a character for myself and what it looks like for me. Even if the character is given to me in the specs where they have the art for it, I completely dismiss that. And I create what it is to me, and that helps me to ground myself in a performance. What do I do when I work with my clients? Help them realize their vision. I ask them what their end goal is. What is it? And so I work with the end in mind. So if they say, oh, our goal is to, get into this particular demographic. Okay, what is it about that demographic that you're trying to get to that you're not doing currently? So I ask open-ended questions, if at all possible. And then I work with the end in mind. Yeah, simple as that. Well, simple. And I'm going to get you, Marcus. Oh, I'm going to get you. I'm going to popcorn over to Edward. Edward, your 3 questions.
The 3 voice actors that pop immediately. As a kid, being blown away by Mark Hamill as a Joker in Batman animated series, I think that showed me the possibility of voice acting and how it was so far from the Luke Skywalker image that probably all of us had. And then when you realize, oh my God, they're the same person, it was like, it blew my mind. I remember raving about it in school and no one believed me. They're like, no, you're stupid. And I just like, no, it's the same guy. So him. Later on, during college time, there was playing the video game Mass Effect and hearing Jennifer Hale as the female shepherd. I was like, it was interesting because it was like, you obviously the default setting is the male version, but then hearing the female version was in my opinion, a superior version. It was the better gameplay experience in terms of no disrespect to the original guy. I think he did great, but Jennifer Hale, I think, just elevated it. And it just showed me how you can take the same lines and do something completely different with it. So her, and the third one, watching in college Avatar: The Last Airbender and just being basically crying all the time, hearing Mako as Uncle Iroh, especially the episode about him going around town and then him setting the memorial for his son. Yeah, there's a reason why that episode won an Emmy, because of that performance. Like, it was just like, I think that's when you see the power of voice acting, especially what Mako did with Uncle Iroh in that episode. Just showed you that when people say, oh, animation or kid shows are just for kids, it's not for adults. I'm like, you need to watch this episode then, because I think you can get so much out of it. Even if you didn't watch Avatar: The Last Airbender, you have the entire story within like 6 minutes. And it tells you exactly who this guy is and the tragedy behind it. And if a story can reach out to you in 6 minutes like that, then you know it's not only because of the animators and everything, but the voice acting and how powerful voice acting can be, and how it doesn't get the respect that it deserves. And I show them this to show that what you can do with really good voice acting. So those are three I show as my examples of that. In terms of what I do to get into character, I think more often than not, it's like I do realize I do pay attention to the specs, obviously not married to it, but it does help me. This is something I learned from on-camera theater too. Like, any scene that you're given, like, okay, it's the whole basic who, what, where, why, what's going on, what's the circumstance, you know, what's the most important thing that's happening, and what is your involvement in it. So, like, you know, always know your role in it. Are you like the comic relief? Are you the information giver? Or are you the main character? So it's like, these are things to keep in mind in terms of, like, you can have a good performance, but it doesn't matter if you don't serve the story. That's what I do to get into character. Know the story, and that helps me get into character. What do I do to work with clients to help them realize their vision? Basically, just, for me, to make it simple, just do a good fucking job. Like, if I do a good fucking job, we can have room to play. Like, give them what they want. Obviously, if there's some things where I'm like, I have questions about, I will still try to do what they say. But then I will be like, okay, so I have some questions or I have some objections to it, but I will try to be like, all right, here's what the director wanted. Let me see if I can do it. Give them the product. And then I realize if you can do that, there is room for malleability, where if it's like, hey, let's try it this way instead. But if you can at least give them that, then they can see that you are someone that they can work with. Mind you, that's not compromise. It's not about compromise your integrity. If they push you to a point where it is unacceptable, that's a different story. But within the realm of professionability, where it's just like, you give them, the client, what they want, and then there's room for exploration and more. And I'm going to pass it to Jazzy.
So I'm going to preface the first question by saying I am somebody who knows nobody. I don't know anybody. I just figured out who Nolan North was when I was at One Voice Conference. So life. So that saying, voice actors I admire, it would probably be Kevin Michael Richardson, just for the fact alone that he is barely active on social media, and those are goals. But outside of that, it's the people I work with, the people I, interact with, my community, because I see the work that they're putting in, I see the work they're doing, and it only makes me want to work harder, especially on the advocacy side of things. So those are those who I admire. What do I do to get into character? I break down specs, but that's about it, because I do believe improv is super duper important. And if I am overreading the script, the character lines, one, I'm going to overthink it, and two, I will not improv. It's just, so there's no other improv than reading a line for the first time. And for three, what do I do with clients? I direct with them. So most of my sessions are commercial or narration, and for a lot of like the commercial sessions, like the engineer will do when you're in session, they'll be doing the editing there, right? And they'll put it over the copy or the video and stuff. And the client will like watch it and, you know, make changes or whatever. If you do that with them, be like, you know what, can I actually try, you know, doing this read? Because I feel like it would be more of a feel, or like if they're like, well, talking to each other, like, well, what do you think we should do? Some kind of feel, they're like, actually, you know, maybe we should try this, and it might do what you do. It shows you're involved. It'll help them, you know, with the project, and they'll be like, you know what do you think of that? It's a good idea. Let's give it a shot. And so, yeah, that's what I do.
Awesome. Well, Eli, you get
Yeah.
to round us out
Popcorn
and
over.
evening. So make it profound, because you're the last to go in there. That's how we wrap
No
it up.
pressure.
Profoundness.
I'm pretty simple with my answers. So who I look up to, or Keith David. Keith David is one of my favorite voice actors, and we actually share the same agent. So I'm a huge fan of Keith David ever since Gargoyles. Cree Summer, I love Cree Summer. Been a fan of her since, you know, A Different World. And Mark Hamill, and surprisingly, because we forget that he was Luke Skywalker. He is so good at what he do that you have to watch Star Wars to remember, oh, there's Mark Hamill, he's Luke Skywalker. The other question, as far as preparing, I'm a method actor, so I'm a person that researches. So any character that I do, I research the character, the traits of the character. So that's how I get in the mindset. I'm probably not a fun person to be around when I get into that mode, because if I'm playing someone that's evil or mean, that's exactly how I'm going to be. You know, so I don't get out of character while I'm doing doing my projects. And lastly, what I do, the question was what I do to help the client realize their vision, right? Tanesha?
Yep, that's it.
Oh, okay. I treat the project like it's mine. Like I said earlier, you know, it's all about relationship building to me, and clients care that you care about their project. So of course I love my money, but I don't look at them as just dollar signs. I look at their project like it's my project, like it's my money, and it's me being promoted. Because at the end of the day, my voice is my brand, and anything that gets put out there with my voice on it, it has to be on point. So that's my mindset, and how I help clients, how it helps me to help realize the client's vision, is I treat their project like it's my project. And I take good care of my voice, I take good care of my brand, so I take damn good care of my clients, and I let them know it.
And it is what it is. Well, thank you all so much for yet another ethics and representation panel. Jazzy, Marcus, Edward, thank you so much, Eli, for joining us on this one. Yeah, it's been real, it's been fun. If you didn't catch it on the first time, and it's live now, it'll be on our PGM VO page and elsewhere. Oh, you want to take a photo? Okay. Yes, we do this. We take.
No, I thought you would want to, because the
You
one time we
know-
didn't remind you, you got mad at us about it.
True, but yes.
So you're just gonna put me out on Front Street wearing a short dress with the wind blowing like that? Okay.
I
Marcus,
mean-
me and you, babe. Me and you. Gotcha.
Wow,
That's
the
two.
specifics of that, the details.
You
Amazing.
know, it's all about the details. Okay. So on 3, we will do whatever you want. You want to smile, not smile, you put up fingers. Well, not all fingers. There's certain ones that are off limits, you know. Well, this is not family friendly still. All right, so we're gonna do 2. You ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3. All righty, and then 1 to do whatever you want. Be silly, whatever, doesn't matter. 1, 2, 3. All right, thanks so much, everybody. If all hearts and minds are clear, we are done for the night. Enjoy the rest of your evenings, and catch us in same bat time, same bat channel this time next month, because we have even more shenanigans for you. All right, y'all have a good night. Bye.
Bye, everyone.